Imagine waking up one day and realizing the person you trusted most was lying to you for years. Not about small things, about everything. Their love, their promises, even their name. You'd feel lost, betrayed. But what if I told you that for some people, the truth is even worse? This isn't just a lie, it's a second life. Sarah stood at David's funeral. The crowd around her cried. She didn't. She just watched as they lowered his casket into the ground. The man she'd been married to for 20 years. The man who'd promised her forever. The man who'd left her 3 years ago, saying he needed space. Now here he was, gone for good. But something wasn't right. Because as the priest spoke, Sarah noticed a woman across the gravesite. A woman she'd never seen before. And this woman wasn't just crying. She was holding the hand of a little boy, a boy who looked exactly like David. Sarah's stomach dropped, because in that moment she knew David hadn't just left her, he'd been lying the whole time. And this funeral, it was only the beginning. 18 months after the divorce, Sarah was finally starting to move on. She'd kept the house in Scottsdale. The kids were adjusting. That Tuesday afternoon, she was just returning some shoes at the Chandler Fashion Center when she saw him, David, leaning against the railing near the food court, laughing at something on his phone. Same smile, same way he used to tilt his head when he found something genuinely funny. For half a second, her body reacted before her brain could stop it. That automatic warmth she'd felt for 20 years. Then she saw the stroller. A woman about her age was pushing it toward him. Dark hair, bright red sundress. David looked up, and his face changed in a way Sarah hadn't seen in years. That open, unguarded happiness he'd stopped showing her long before the divorce. He kissed the woman on the cheek, took the baby from the stroller. That's when Sarah noticed the little boy clutching the woman's hand, maybe 6 years old, wearing a Cubs shirt, looking up at David with that particular mix of awe and comfort that only exists between fathers and sons. Sarah stood frozen near the escalators, gripping the shoe bag too tight. The math came fast this time. That boy was at least 5, maybe 6, which meant David had been living this life while still sharing her bed, while still signing "Love Always" on their anniversary cards, while sitting across from their marriage counselor, promising to work on communication. The woman said something that made David laugh again. Sarah watched his hand rest comfortably on the small of her back, the exact same way he used to touch her when they were newlyweds. That's when the little boy looked up and saw Sarah staring. His eyes narrowed. He tugged David's sleeve and pointed right at her. For one terrible second, their eyes met. David's face went slack. Sarah turned so fast she nearly tripped. She heard him call her name once, but she was already pushing through the crowd toward the nearest exit. Her hands shook as she fumbled for her keys in the parking lot. One thought screamed louder than all the others. That wasn't just an affair. That was an entire family. By the time she reached her car, her phone was buzzing. David. She declined the call. Then the texts started coming. First 1, then 3, then a flood. She turned her phone off completely. The drive home took 20 minutes. She spent every one of them realizing how many pieces of her life had been complete fiction. That night, she did 2 things. First, she poured every glass of wine in the house down the sink. Then she opened her laptop and typed 2 words into Google, "Private investigator," because Sarah needed answers, and she was going to get every last one of them. What she would uncover would make that mall encounter look simple. The private investigator's report arrived in a plain manila envelope. Sarah sat at her kitchen counter, the same one where David used to drink his morning coffee, and spread out the documents. Credit card statements, flight records, photographs. Each piece of paper revealed another layer of the lie. But it was Linda's Facebook page that showed the full picture. Sarah scrolled through years of posts. There was David at Disneyland with Linda's kids, The same week he'd told Sarah he was at a construction conference in Vegas. There he was blowing out birthday candles on what was supposed to be their anniversary. The dates matched up perfectly. While Sarah thought her husband was working late, he'd been coaching Little League games in Mesa. When he claimed to be visiting his sick mother in Tucson, he was actually taking Linda to Sedona for romantic weekends. Then Sarah found the photo that made her hands go still. A family portrait from 2 Christmases ago. David wore the sweater she'd bought him, standing in front of a tree she'd never seen, surrounded by people who believed he belonged to them. The timestamp showed December 24th at 6:17 p.m. Sarah pulled up her own photos. There was the selfie she'd taken that same exact evening, alone in their living room, waiting for David to come home from what he'd called an emergency job site visit. The digital clock on their mantle clearly read 8:42 p.m. He'd been in 2 places at once. Sarah kept scrolling. Vacation photos from Hawaii. During the month, David had claimed his construction crew was working double shifts on a military base with no cell service. School play videos where David cheered from the front row. On nights he'd told Sarah he was stuck in traffic. A birthday party for the little boy where David wore the same shirt Sarah had given him for Father's Day. The more Sarah looked, the clearer it became. This wasn't just an affair. This was a fully constructed second life, with its own holidays, traditions, and inside jokes. A life that had been running parallel to hers for years. Every date, every trip, every family moment had been carefully scheduled and compartmentalized. Sarah closed the laptop. She walked to the garage where David's old toolbox still sat on the shelf. Inside, under a layer of sawdust and loose nails, she found what she was looking for, the spare key to his office. The next morning, while the rest of Phoenix was waking up, Sarah would put that key to use. Because credit card statements and Facebook photos only told part of the story. To really understand how deep this went, she needed to see the paper trail David had been hiding in plain sight. What she found in that office would rewrite everything she thought she knew about her marriage. Sarah sat in her car outside Linda's house for 43 minutes before knocking. She watched the curtains move, saw the shadow of someone peering out. The door opened just a crack at first, the chain still on. Then wider when Linda recognized her from the mall. "You're David's," Linda started but didn't finish. The words hung between them like a bad smell neither wanted to name. Inside, the house smelled like lavender and baby powder. Family photos covered the walls. David holding a newborn. David grilling in the backyard. David helping a little girl ride a bike. Sarah pointed to one. "That was our anniversary. He told me he was working a double shift." Linda's face changed then. Not angry, not defensive, just confused. "Our anniversary?" Linda repeated. She walked to a bookshelf, pulled down a photo album, flipped to a page marked with a ribbon. There was David and Linda on a beach, dated 3 years earlier. "This was our honeymoon," Linda said. Sarah recognized the watch on David's wrist, the one she'd given him for their 15th anniversary. They compared dates like accountants going over tax returns. The weekend David took Linda to San Diego, Sarah had the hospital records showing he'd signed her out after her gallbladder surgery. The Christmas card with Linda's family, time-stamped the same hour David FaceTimed Sarah from his hunting trip. Linda started shaking, not crying, just this full-body tremble like her bones were trying to escape her skin. She showed Sarah their marriage certificate, the mortgage papers with both their names, the life insurance policy where David had listed Linda as his sole beneficiary. "He told me his ex died in a car accident," Linda whispered, "showed me a newspaper clipping and everything." Sarah laughed then, a sharp, ugly sound, because she remembered that clipping. It was from when David's cousin passed away. He'd stolen a family tragedy and repurposed it. The baby started crying from the next room. Linda didn't move to check, just kept staring at Sarah's left hand, at the wedding band she still wore. "You're still married to him," Linda said. Not a question, just the final piece clicking into place. They sat at Linda's kitchen table, two women who should have been strangers, passing documents back and forth like evidence in a trial. School permission slips David had signed as father, medical forms listing him as next of kin, a will leaving everything to Linda and the kids, all while legally married to Sarah, all while paying alimony and child support to a woman he'd claimed was his dead ex-wife. The sun was going down when Sarah finally stood to leave. Linda followed her to the door. They didn't hug, didn't make promises, just looked at each other with the same hollowed-out expression, two people realizing they'd both been cast in a play where only David knew the lines. As Sarah reached her car, Linda called out one last question. "How many others do you think there are?" Sarah didn't answer, but as she drove away, she realized the truly terrifying part wasn't that David had lived a double life. It was that after everything they'd uncovered today, she still wasn't convinced they'd found all of it. Sarah sat in David's old office chair, the one he'd left behind when he moved out. The filing cabinet keys she'd kept all these years still worked. Inside, behind folders labeled tax returns and business licenses, she found what she was looking for, a slim blue folder marked personal. The papers inside told a story numbers couldn't lie about. Bank statements showed regular transfers to an account under Linda's name. Large withdrawals every March, right around Linda's birthday. A second mortgage on their home that Sarah never signed for. But the real shock came when she pulled out the life insurance documents. David had taken out 3 separate policies, one naming Sarah as beneficiary, one for Linda, and a third for someone named Michelle in Tempe. Sarah's hands didn't shake as she dialed her mother's number. "Remember that inheritance from Grandma?" she asked. "The $85,000 you gave us for the kids' college funds?" Her mother confirmed the exact date the check cleared. Sarah matched it to a withdrawal from their joint account the same week. David had moved the money to a new account the next day. By the end of that month, he'd put a down payment on Linda's house. She kept digging, found credit cards she never knew about, business loans taken out against their home equity, even a car lease for a BMW registered to Linda's address, all while telling Sarah they couldn't afford to replace her aging minivan. The paper trail led to one inescapable conclusion. Every dollar David claimed was tied up in his business. Every excuse about tight finances had been funding his other family. Then she found the emails, printed and tucked behind the files. Correspondence with a lawyer dated just before he asked for the divorce. David had been trying to transfer assets to an LLC, drafts of letters to banks authorizing account changes, a notarized document giving him power of attorney over Sarah's accounts, with a forged signature. He wasn't just stealing from her, he'd been laying groundwork to take everything. Sarah took photos of every document, made copies of every record. As she locked the filing cabinet, her phone buzzed. A text from Linda. "Found something you need to see." Attached was a photo of a bank deposit slip. The amount matched Sarah's missing inheritance exactly. The memo line read, "Wedding gift for our fresh start." That night, Sarah did 3 things. First, she changed all her passwords. Then she called a forensic accountant. Finally, she went to the safe deposit box she'd kept in just her name since before the marriage. Inside was one item David never knew about, her grandfather's vintage Rolex. The next morning, she pawned it for cash. Not because she needed the money, but because she was about to wage a war David would never see coming. Because Sarah wasn't just fighting for the truth anymore, she was fighting for every penny he'd stolen, and she was prepared to burn his entire world down to get it back. The police cars arrived just as the last guests were fleeing the anniversary party. David tried to leave through the kitchen, but an officer stopped him at the emergency exit. Sarah watched from the parking lot as they read him his rights. The charges came fast: bigamy, fraud, forgery. The handcuffs clicked around his wrists. the same way his briefcase used to snap shut when he left for those fake business trips. Linda filed for annulment the next morning. The bank froze David's accounts by noon. By dinner time, Sarah's lawyer had filed a civil suit for every penny he'd stolen. But the real consequences came weeks later, when the DA added embezzlement charges after tracing company funds to secret accounts in 3 states. David's mugshot hit the local news. His construction business collapsed when clients pulled contracts. The house in Linda's name went into foreclosure. Reporters dug up his past, the bankruptcies in other states, the lawsuits from angry investors, the 2 other women who came forward with similar stories. Sarah's phone kept ringing, first Linda, wanting to compare notes, then Michelle from Tempe, shocked to learn her husband had other families. Finally, David's mother, begging Sarah to drop the charges. She didn't. The case went to trial. The judge called David's actions calculated, cruel, and repeated. The sentence, 7 years in state prison. On the day of sentencing, Sarah sat in the front row. David looked back at her once, his expression unreadable. She met his gaze without blinking. As the bailiffs led him away, she noticed his expensive watch was gone, confiscated with his personal effects, the same watch she'd helped pay for with her inheritance. Outside the courthouse, reporters asked why she pursued this so relentlessly. Sarah just held up a photo, David holding Linda's children at Disneyland on what would have been their daughter's 16th birthday. "I didn't do this for revenge," she told them. "I did it so he can't hurt anyone else." Then she walked away, leaving the cameras and questions behind. The story made national news for a week. Then the world moved on. But in Phoenix, 3 women who should have been strangers started meeting for coffee every month, comparing notes, sharing documents, making sure no piece of David's tangled web remained hidden. Because sometimes karma needs a little help. And sometimes, the best revenge isn't violence or screaming. It's watching someone face the consequences of their own choices, one undeniable truth at a time. As for David, he learned the hard way that prison cells have bars on the windows, no second families, no secret accounts, no lies left to tell, just 4 walls, time to think, and the knowledge that everything he built his life on was gone forever. So what do you think? Was Sarah right to expose David the way she did? To crash his anniversary, hand over the evidence, and watch his life unravel? Or should she have taken a quieter approach, gone through the courts, kept it private, spared Linda and the kids the public spectacle? Some would say David got exactly what he deserved, that after years of lies, stealing, and betrayal, he had it coming. Others might argue revenge only dragged Sarah down to his level, that the best payback would have been walking away and leaving him to his own mess. But here's the real question. If you were in her shoes, what would you have done? Hunted down every secret like she did? Burned it all to the ground? Or just taken what was yours and disappeared? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you've ever known someone like David, someone who lived a double life, tell us how you found out. Stories like this, they're more common than you think. This is where we wrap up today's twisted tale. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell, because the next story, you'll not want to miss it.